Well, I sampled this monologue on RJ. I'm going to try it one more time. It's kind of a play on words. You have to know what a person is talking about, different things. Like a short person sold short the market by accidentally buying from a windfall, tax impacting, last minute investment by a couple tired of their paperwork obligations. Little did they know, most of the world spoke a different language. So today, who learns only one language? Who knows only one language? People from the United States. The implication there is that if at the last minute a couple decided, oh man, we're doing our taxes, this and that, we've got this much money, let's say we invest it in game stock. I'm seeing it's going up a little bit. We'll invest in that. And at the last minute, because of what happened with the GameStop market driven manipulation 2 years ago, they would have made a fortune. That's just one of the things that was bugging me today. Only a few people ever saw all the gold that was in Jerusalem's temple. It was behind a big curtain, RJ. A lot of the things, that was the divine beauty. One person a year got to see all of it.
Well, yeah, as far as once it was staged in after the tabernacle was erected and set up, but in transit, what everything was covered.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, I thought the mercy seat was on the poles or what the
Yeah,
Ark of the
that the
Covenant.
ark could be paraded, but a lot of the other stuff was covered up. And people, were left with their faith. I have here from the spinning jenny to the flying shuttle. And I was interrupted. I went out and left off with the perfected balance of crying wolf. It's a play on what title I used. The idea from the spinning jenny, the girl, like making a one pair of pants for her husband, to the flying shuttle was where all of a sudden you could have water powered flying shuttles making 100 pairs of pants at a time, twice as fast. As the
The
world
industrial
changed,
age. Yeah,
it was the
mechanic.
industrial age. The industrial age was needed. We studied hard yesterday all of the level water involved in keeping New York in clean water. So that's where we're going to pick it up. Welcome, everybody, to Mud Flood was Armageddon. The Mud Flood was the Armageddon. Then they had the 1,000 years. Now you got the orphan train on your brain. Me and my friends aren't going to tell you anything else. I welcome RJ, the famous Randy from Wisconsin. Are you ready to see what we got, RJ? This should be
Yeah, sometime here. Yeah.
okay. Let's do it here. I'm going to show this one thing. Might look at a few videos. Now that's covered the actual building, everything, the tunnels that are leaking now, millions, I guess they say half the water gets to New York from those miraculous systems that they set up. I wanted you to notice the donkey. And this is supposed to be a picture of a man in a tunnel working it. He looks photoshopped. I don't know what this monkey looking Homo sapien is just trying to be like, I'm tired or something. I don't know. But these shields were real and they were digging into subterranean earth and vibrating it, and it'd come out the bottom, and these guys would throw it in a thing and a donkey would carry it out. That's their story. And they'll stick into it. So I just snapped a few along the way to show you that Doesn't look like it was rounded out by that tunneling shield, does it? And neither, something's going on in here. A lot of mysteries involved. Here is the shield that they found the shield in England. They found the shield in the United States, and then we took off building tunnels, trains, spreading them all over the world. Look at, boy, those guys, that tunnel must have gone in straight and then dipped down because they're in a different level. This is how they say these shields work. Modern version, a drilling it, and then I guess so it doesn't make any sense that 11 months ago, the TED Talks, 21 million subscribers, they're finally getting on board. Everybody's going to be like, wow. And with everybody, I don't mean just only the United States. The world is realizing, wow, the United States and that missile Nazi thing, Romano-Celtic goddess. That would be Isis. That would be Mary, Suis Minerva, one of the Greek gods. Minerva is the French version of our Columbia. And I did want to look at these letters, but mostly I just wanted to see if that point out that their goddess Minerva. Bitter winter, the Great Bengal famine of 1770, when taxes created genocide. After having been forced to pay taxes at gunpoint, they had no money left to survive. The original estimates of the Great Bengal famine was 10 million, but at least the people in town had food. But they said, no, we're going to call it 2 million now, because 10 million would be more than 6 million. That's the magic number you don't go over. Two halves of the North River met underneath the Hudson River on September 11th. I saw that and I had to click it, RJ. I'm going to screen save anything that mentions September 11th as a big day. So anyway, this Hudson River's not working as well as it should. This is the idea in the 1830s they had, let's build tunnels underneath the ground. They got pictures. They said they did it. The reason for this video is because this tunnel is falling apart. All of the 3 North River tunnels, either they built them or they cleaned them out for real in Satan's little season and our reset, and they could only figure it out. They couldn't do it good like they used to or something. And so this was actually, if I could have gotten the time, but I can see about where it is, how the tunnel shield is supposed to work. It has feelers that probe it, and you can see it just folds the dirt, and then the donkeys carry it away, and it leaves a tunnel behind. That's they've got the plans, the sweeping motion, the vibrating sounds loosens the dirt, and they clean it out. They made a tunnel, and it's rising and falling with the tide. They can't really figure that out. Something seems strange on me here. I know that the standard gauge track is 4 feet 8 inches. That seems way longer. I've seen that this is how they could build tunnels, short tunnels. It's just hard. Here's the thumbnail yesterday was this corner of where this is a construction photo. So keep this one in your mind and you'll see that, are they just putting limestone on the top? How much of it is Zebulon Pike came pretty close to Leadville, Colorado in 1806, and part of that, he was doing what Lewis and Clark was doing, so he got almost, that's in the middle, that's 2 miles high in the mountains. So here's that bridge that I told you that they were working on. That's that section that was coming over. that they built in the early 1900s. I'm all about the water and what's going on with it. We got this other story here too. Uh, we're starting the show, RJ. I guess the more Americans are, it does seem that, like, since the 1990s, since the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, when Bill Clinton told Rush Limbaugh, it's your fault for telling the people that America's doing bad things, militias started forming. And they were a fringe then, and I guess they're still a fringe now, RJ. But if you want to be a prepared citizen, and that used to mean somebody that's not gay, but I'm sure they're going to start having articles about gays are getting guns, because they do that every 5 or 6 years. Former Air Force guy, people want to make the money. But can you blame anybody? Can you blame this girl for wanting to buy a gun? The way things are going, I can't, although
Well, yeah, I'm sure it'll affect. Yeah, priorities will change.
more people are
I mean,
looking
you'll still
into.
want to eat probably at least once in 24 hours, maybe twice.
Yeah, especially if you're a little one, burning them calories pretty fast. You know, people are talking about keeping chickens, vegetable gardens. People want to keep their immunity intact. They don't want to sacrifice their immunity to the doctors.
Yeah,
These,
it's unlikely that we'll be able to, survive, eating plastic, even though our bodies are
yeah,
to find, animals, and plants, food supply, water, plastic seems to be in everything.
yeah, and they don't care.
Well, I
Uh,
don't know what you can do about it. You can try and avoid it, but
right.
you know,
That article led me to another one about the McLaren Child Center, because they never just really named it, and it was the McLarens. It was that guy from the Presidio that was the devil worshiper. They were renting kids, flying them all over the United States. Cheryl Botkin remembers the smell of the staff members there who would put her on his lap and make her hold a Raggedy Ann doll while he heard her. JC remembers social workers who accused him at age 7 of fabricating when he tried to tell them what a doctor there had done to them. This is that juvenile detention foster care systems that caused the satanic panic. This is back in the late 60s, early 70s and crap. And now finally, some of this people that are, it's been settled. $4 billion, thousands of people. Yeah, I guess we should stop saying it was only satanic panic, because they just paid these people $4 billion to make it go away. Yet they never mentioned that one Grandma McLaren or brother or the satanic rituals in this whole thing. They just mentioned that, oh, I'm glad that Miss Ashbrook, doesn't have to have electroshock therapy, and these 7,000 people were really sexually abused by satanic pedophiles at the Los Angeles County's juvenile detention and foster care systems. And, we've heard about the McLaren Day School, but the actual name of their whole system is the McLaren thing. That is their go-to, because if you were homeless, even while they were under abuse for these last 20 years, LA would send you to the McLaren group, and you'd lived there since 1959.
4 billion
That's a lot.
seems. Well, yeah, and it's coming out. Who has the budget? Where's the 4 billion?
Right. Yeah.
Or they just,
Where they this that doesn't count the Los Angeles Boy Scouts of America who had to pay 2.6 for the same reason, because it seems like they were set up in a way to take the young Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts out in the country and say, "Hey, now that we're alone, you want to know what tickles?"
well, if they had that kind of a budget, you'd think they could do some something else with it other than paying victims.
So the satanic panic thing, the single McLaren home where a few were satanically panicked into thinking that they'd been attacked by Satanists, that wasn't just the McLaren little thing. It was the whole, all their claims involved the McLaren Children's Center, which is what they call everything. You know, there's one in every town. Here's one in El Monte. It's their California system, is what I'm trying to say. It was all set up. But they never just mentioned the satanic panic or the story for that mom that ran it and the kids that said they're flying us all over. They just basically say, well, after 60 years, it's been settled finally. And here's a hotline. You know, the proposed agreement includes, oh, so when people call and say they're abusing my children, we won't ignore them anymore. Wow.
At least they have it in writing now.
Like, so whenever their head hits the pillow and they want those sweet dreams, they can count on that. The pink moon is no big deal. It just has to have a name. All new moons have a farmer's moon, a beer moon, or just kidding. There's some sort of a moon.
If it's supposed to happen, Saturday morning, I don't understand why Sunday isn't Easter.
Because it's not convenient. But RJ, the deal is that the pink moon is not going to be pink. It is one of the things that its apogee. It has it's not in that perfect synchronistic orbit. It wobbles. It's a pear-shaped thing, but it's going to be rising with another star that people will go, maybe Jesus is hiding there. This is the opposite of a supermoon. The pink moon will be the smallest that people can ever see it. It's going to be, because it's in a elliptical thing. It's like that pear-shaped, and the Earth wobbles and the moon has a slightly elliptic thing. So it's going to be, furthest away from us, and it's going to look funny.
Yeah, it'd be like a December sun. I mean, it travels that far every month. What it takes the sun to, travel extremes 6 months. The moon does it every month.
Here's what I was
just so happens this full moon, it'll be out there like a December sun.
To you. This is what I want to do with flywheel energy. I've got in my mind the way that I can get 3 of these things working together and be able to transfer all of that energy into a forward motion, so that, by just once you get these things looping, and if you had 3 of them going to where at least one is always being forced forward, you can channel on that. I don't know how many RPMs and things like that, but if you lined the edge of this saw blade with copper and reversed magnets, I don't care what anybody tells me. Oh, you're not a chemist or a scientist. You don't know. I do know. you'll make electricity, everybody. That's why this is what I was trying to explain to you is these old, from this handheld whirligig, now I've got these delusions of making electricity out of a handheld thing that uses 3 of these that can transfer the energy forward. Like I need one more thing to think about. But it led me to go like, what? Chinese? Really? You did a bamboo helicopter back? Come on, you guys. Would you please? The Japanese? What's with? I mean, so the helicopter thing that they invented in the 1930s, I mean, that technically that science was there, but they just was a toy to them. What do we know about our history, RJ? Anything at all? So if you want
Not
to
much
make,
at all.
if you guys want to make one, you could just do it like that. You could study what I mean by the friction, and then as your little button spinning around there, just imagine a positive, negative, batteries, glued to the end, and then wrapping it all in copper and spinning it. Somebody will know what's going on with it. I don't really believe that they built this in the 1700s, RJ. It's just one of those things that the Hegelian dialectic has the people. It's just, one more thing. Fort Niagara. We've heard it all before. It's a fortification near Youngstown, Ohio. Which, like that other poison thing you sent me, is near that, Love Canal is near Niagara because, yeah, Tesla and those guys, they turned it into a star fort heaven that within 30 years poisoned everybody. So they really ran that baby up and turned the Fort Niagara, the Niagara Falls, from a look what we found into a wow, everybody's dead. Everybody's dying over here. Let's got to shut the town and down and move them. 1915. That's a year that I know. In 1914, Margaret Sanger was arrested for mentioning birth control in a pamphlet, but in 1915 she could open up Planned Parenthood and start calling for abortions. And supposedly, that was a picture from then, 1756. Enough. We have really all the proof we need to know that they're just lying, lying, lying. And the deal with the whole Niagara, the Jay Treaty, 1794, years of peace, I guess, 10 whole years. Our children had like 10 years of peace, maybe 15, between Vietnam and then the Arnold Schwarzkopf shock and awe, where we had 1 million people to go kick Saddam Hussein's ass. But this was a big deal. French, English, Spanish, and then the United States. John Jay popped it up. The treaty, hotly contested by Democrats and Republicans in each state, was an effort made to block it by the House of Representatives, which ultimately failed. Republican politicians feared that closer American economic and political ties with Britain would strengthen Hamilton's Federalist Party, promote aristocracy, and undercut republicanism, which I guess is the Phrygian cap stuff. This debate crystallized the emerging partisan divisions. Okay, so we've been divided that long. Shaped the new first party system, with Federalists favoring British and Democratic Republicans favoring France. Way to go, Thomas Jefferson. You pushed us over the edge with your friend Ben Franklin towards France. Treaty lasted 10 years, then Napoleon Bonaparte came back and kicked everybody's ass, cut off their heads, and said, kneeled to the king again. And they did, but then they thought, one day the LBGTQKers are going to come out of the woodwork. And so it had to do with Niagara and this stuff, because it was one of the first big deals where confiscation of loyalist properties happened. And it continued up until the thing of when we're gonna watch this one, then I'll jump back to what I was gonna pick it up with Niagara, because the same thing happened in Niagara.
That the same patterns are now being replicated across Africa. For a clear
Yeah,
example,
that's further east.
hailed as an Agra success story. In 2009, the country launched subsidies to push over 1 million farmers to switch to commercial seeds and intensive fertilizer. But the country has since faced droughts, which wiped out these non traditional crops, and the soil is so degraded from chemicals that farmers struggle to grow anything else.
Wow.
Over that period, the number of undernourished Zambians increased by 29%. Today, 6 million Zambians, nearly a third of the population, face malnutrition. But there's an even bigger problem: the growing corporate grip on Africa's seeds. AGRA and its allies promote commercial seed laws that benefit a handful of corporations, like Bayer Monsanto, Syngenta, and DuPont, which now control 60% of the world's seeds and nearly 70% of the chemicals used to grow food. The laws are also reinforced by UP91, an international agreement that restricts farmers from saving or sharing seeds.
I think that somehow, RJ, when I was a capitalist and if big business was doing this, I would have fought it and said, you know what? It's business, man. If you would have been Monsanto, you could have been Monsanto, you would have been Monsanto. And now you're jealous you're not Monsanto. It's not their job to want to have to legally protect your grandchildren. Is that a weak argument?
Well, yeah, as long as there isn't any liability, you don't mind having the deep pockets for all that profit. But once things get flipped where, oh, you're responsible for the mess you made, yipes.
That's
That
the
can,
idea. That's what I'm trying to get to, is that the Apostle Peter, basically, it was, if you want to join us, you'll have all things in common. In the meantime, it's yours. You can sell and do it with whatever you want, but don't lie about it. Don't say we're all in with you Christians and you're not. That's going to be the takeaway, because you can't, say eminent domain. We're going to take your house because it benefits these good people over here, or we're going to poison your food because in the long run, capitalism and communism, from a this works point of view, is not going to kill its subjects, its citizens, its friends, its the ones that, oh, I'm in office only because my friends like me and they know I'll represent them fairly. That's what's always been missing, RJ.
yeah, that inside trader thing is kind of quite the benefit, right?
Where's that Bible verse? Is it the proverb that says, woe to the king that sends a sluggard as his messenger? I think that's the gist of it, because, that Jimmy recommended his son Johnny, and Jimmy was a go-getter, so I hired Johnny. And then when I sent him on his first message, he stopped in at the local bar for a 3-hour lunch. It happens. It happens to them. Hopefully,
Yeah, as far as the king setting up his advisors, he might want to rethink if he just is looking for yes men for the long run, the long haul. But if you're in for it, just for a term, that may work for the
yeah,
time being. But
yeah. The idea term limits are better, but it is constant vigilance that is the only thing that is going to help it. And our government, I don't think we should pretend that, when the leftists say you're crony capitalist, that we should go, no, we're not. That's not being honest. We have to think, we're not doing it right. It hasn't been a deal. I want to look a little bit
supply of
at
fresh
New York's water problem and tie it back into how they found it. This is the video that decided to keep me on the water thing. So give us the background here.
Hudson River to the west does use the term correctly. It is a legitimate freshwater river, but by the time it arrives on the shores of Manhattan, it doubles as another ocean estuary. As the tides rise, seawater pushes in against the flow. The river only becomes usable freshwater somewhere between the Tappan Zee Bridge and Poughkeepsie, depending on season and conditions. That's to say, the waterways that surround New York City...
I don't want people bogged down in the details. What I'm just trying to show you here is these people needed fresh water. They didn't want to end up in the great stink that they'd read about 50 years ago. Only 50 years to them of what happened in the Bowery, what happened in London and Constantinople. They didn't know how to populate their city, so somehow they were going to fix it. They did this, and it worked for a while, but that was a lot of people for a reset.
And so did some of the earliest European fortifications, but centuries on, after
This
the
is
Dutch left and the English
1700s.
moved in, tanneries, breweries, and other water-hungry businesses took over these same lakefront lots. For the burgeoning city, this proved problematic, as heavy use of the area's sole major water source made that same source unusable. The water was poisoned by the city around it, and so were the people. Wells were dug, but the situation was the same. The groundwater table...
All right, so that's not hard to spot the problem, is it? So they're going to
At the
fix
time of
it.
its opening, this aqueduct was heralded as a feat of engineering bested only by marvels like the Panama and Suez canals. It was something that superpowers would boast of, built by a single city. But New York didn't stop there. 2 decades on, it became clear that the ever-expanding metropolis needed yet more supply. So, it built one single, continuous 85-mile, 137-kilometer tunnel. This was an inconceivable step forward. Before it, the world's longest tunnel stretched just 29 miles or 47 kilometers. This was over 3 times longer, and still today, the better part of a century on, maintains the title.
It's the longest tunnel in the world. The early 19, it's breaking down now.
Liquid sent through a tube will always return to its source elevation regardless of the path of that tube. That's to say, water will flow upward against the force of gravity as long as the output of the tube sits below the input. Therefore, it's rather useful that the Delaware Aqueduct's origin, the Rondout Reservoir, sits some 545 feet or 166 meters higher.
The contradictions are, RJ, that I like to think that we're not the dumbest people in the world, but would we have thought of something like this when we were in between, feeding our beautiful wives and chopping wood and making sure that there's going to be food on the table. And then that night, instead of playing, cards, we sit around and go like, oh, what are we going to do in 100 years when we need more water? I don't know. Let's go check 100 miles over there and see if we can find a lake that we can pump it here to where we live on the coast.
Yeah, last thing you want to have to do is dig a well, yeah.
Yeah, because that wouldn't work, because we're sitting around wanting to help what we think is going to be millions of people. They make it seem like it should be so easy, but then you run into it's big.
For winter, when water use tends to be lowest, but still, considerable work has gone into assuring the Catskill Aqueduct can operate at full capacity, and that typically minor water sources like the Croton Aqueducts can ramp up to pick up the slack.
That used to be a minor thing, but this was designed, blocked off. Who knows if their day, used eminent domain and said, these other people are more important, you go relocate. And maybe there's some argument for that sometime, but all these people.
Phosphate to limit lead leakage from pipes, and sodium hydroxide to balance the water's pH level. Some additives are introduced to the system at static rates, while others are added in accordance to real-time water quality issues.
It's just amazing.
Raged for nearly 3 months, and of the roughly 60,000 soldiers and Marines that stormed ashore, 12,000 were killed in action. Estimates say that 90,000 Japanese combatants and 150,000 Okinawan civilians also died during the fighting. But even after losing well over 100,000 soldiers themselves during the combined battles for Iwo Jima and Okinawa, Japan still showed no signs of surrender. Apparently, they fully intended to stick with their overall strategy of attrition and endurance. If they could...
Now, where I'm going to be going here and start with, hopefully your thinking cap is screwed on tight. For our mafia worlds, it's very near the end. This is that month. The treaty is over. The Nazis. So now Russia can attack Japan. They had a treaty where Russia wasn't going to attack Japan because they had some deal with the Nazis. That was over for a month. So now they could. They've taken over China, where Japan ruled. And they're claiming there's a coup in Japan. They know that they can't invade. They lost 100,000 in this island because there's layer upon layer of star forts in those islands, and they're not hurting them when you bomb the top. And then they do decide, and it didn't have anything to do with atomic weapons. It had to do with their mafias, and this is a lie. This was a lie. The math doesn't work. You cannot cause an implosion that splits an atom that causes a chain reaction. There is not 97% dark matter in the world that has to exist, even though they can't prove it, because that makes the math work for Einstein's atomic weapons. It's all fake. I wanted you to see some of the highlights of the city that when they show people walking in Nagasaki and stuff like that after, well, is that more at the end here? Listen to their explanations.
Project.
They firebombed everything and claimed it was nukes. Japan would get on board, so they actually had to have like a mafia coup, and then the king said, okay, I'm with you.
Told Groves plainly that he did not want Kyoto to be turned into a pile of radioactive rubble. Stimson, it turned out, had been Governor General to the Philippines in the late 1920s and had visited Kyoto and loved it. He was also rumored to have gone back there on his honeymoon. Stimson was also fully up to date on what had been happening across Japan and was skeptical, in general, about the indiscriminate bombing tactics being used so freely by the Air Force. So, a week after he met with Groves to secure the safety of his beloved Kyoto once and for all, Stimson took his concerns all the way up to President Truman.
These are always rewriting history to explain away how come one town, This was radiation disease?
Ultimately, the completion of the atomic bomb would add 2 other options on the Allies' table. They could continue firebombing, they could invade Japan, or as a third option, Washington was now considering the possibility of a demonstration as an alternative to the immediate use of the bomb against Japan to merely display the atomic bomb's potential power. The scientists...
And I'm saying that was all fake. It had to be all fake. And we'll get back. We got to spread this out. How they, in their mind, our history is as easy as this.
Being a political figure could be devastating. This meant the culture inside the East India trading companies was fine with private trading, so long as you didn't get caught. Imagine that, a multi-billion-dollar financial institution where crime is treated better than negative press. This was why employees didn't petition for a bigger slice of the pie. The real money was in entrepreneurship. Take Robert Clive, British officer, colonial administrator, and, worst of all, politician. He started as a clerk for the British East India Trading Company, then climbed the ranks to eventually help establish British control over India following his decisive victory at the Battle of Plassey in 1757. Yet somehow, the guy helping to oversee some of the most profitable trade routes was amassing a personal fortune that was much, much larger than his company salary. We're talking everything from
So that's their excuse of how it ended up. Our history says it started like this.
From the 1500s to the 17th century, the Western world expanded with the Age of Discovery. Spice routes were big bucks. Empire was big business. Weakening the economy of your rivals would enable you to expand your nation's franchise and monopolize the world before they did. But how do you create a business machine big enough to squeeze the likes of Britain and Portugal out of the new trade routes? To us, the answer is obvious. But in 1602,
They sure know how to relate to us. Just dumb it down and keep it simple.
were forced to get along under a new name and mission.
Oh.
These pre-companies included businesses which had been sending ships to Asia for at least a decade. They had the experience and skills to fulfill their patriotic duties. They also had special protections. 21 years of monopoly were granted to this new consolidation in a strategic move to stem the tide of infighting.
That's a corporation. That's the Dutch East India Company. The other ones. How did that happen, RJ? It's like I always focus on they didn't have nations, they had kingdoms, but I guess we're going to have to make room that they also had corporations.
Oh yeah, that was the big deal.
And how long did it take them to go bad? They started wanting to sell drugs.
Well, corporations continue to dominate.
Yeah, they still do. They started like this.
Making process, which would have been vital given their
Three
own experience in
Musketeers?
sailing in
What?
boats. Their influence required access to the company's details, like bookkeeping. By comparison, ordinary investors got an ordinary return for their ordinary input. Voting rights weren't given. Company details remained mysterious.
In a world that we live in, and the movies that we watch, and the books we've read and heard about, why wouldn't the mafias act like they're the good guys and do like they did with Don Vito and put their son, who was a war hero that never was arrested, in power and kind of run things like that? Or, hey, Jimmy, don't you ever get arrested because you're going to be a cop when you grow up. Those things just seem that would be, if you're already the bad guy and it's like, to them, the golden rule, I've heard them say it, who has the gold makes the rules. Why wouldn't they do that? Why wouldn't they undermine the world if they just act like you're good and we'll be bad? Is that so hard to believe? Is that a conspiracy?
Well, it's not unusual to have, you don't want to have some sort of embarrassing detail of your past, particularly if it's a recent past, regardless of what it is, but something factual that may not make you too proud.
Right. The one,
When you think of Niagara Falls, you likely imagine
check
stunning
this out.
vistas, booming cascades, and a tourist.
Good ideas can
Beneath
go
this
bad.
natural beauty lies a forgotten chapter of American history, one where the roar of the falls wasn't just a natural wonder, but the heartbeat of an industrial empire. You see, for over a century, Niagara Falls wasn't just a global tourist destination. It was a key industrial powerhouse that fueled factories.
This was a picture that 9 years ago, and Doug Bartles and we just sit there going like, it had to be a mud flood. There's no way that Niagara was like that. There's only we didn't know nothing about no Tesla then, but this is really an excellent
But
video.
still, a destination for some tourists. Maybe.
Yeah, but not like it was when we were children. It seemed like everybody that got married that could go there did.
Mills, and entire industries. Along the way, it also turned that city beside it.
Well, I need to take the hound out.
Innovation,
Okay, brother.
growth. But as industry boomed,
Are you gonna come back, or are you signing off?
No, yeah, I got angels to get to school
Okay.
in the morning, and
I know we started an hour late, and you're an hour ahead. Well,
Yeah.
Lord willing, we'll catch up with you when we can. I'm going to finish this off. It's going to, the pictures of
Sweet
Niagara.
dream all when you get there. Later.
Love you like a rock, brother. Can't wait to, share with you later. So let's get back to the Niagara, because this is also a good time to say, there was the electricity there. They had these mills, and then it went bad. It went bad, and you poison the water, and then it doesn't work. Even if they can make America great again, which is beginning to look extremely hard, it won't last. Nothing ever lasts in this world. This is not our home.
so did the challenges, from pollution and displacement to economic decline, and in some cases, outright abandonment. So here's my question. How did a city that once symbolized progress and opportunity become synonymous with urban decay?
You see that? This is 110 years. This isn't like, oh, this is 1760. And this is 2025, It's like 100 years. Everything's changed. It's reset world. We couldn't rebuild those factories and dig those tunnels if our lives depended on it.
Potential. And what remains of that city today? Stay tuned to find out as we uncover the forgotten history of the Niagara Falls Mills District. I'm your host, Ryan Sokash, and you're watching. Flows from Lake Erie to Lake Ontario, forming the boundary between the state of New York and the province of Ontario. Spanning approximately 36 miles, the river is a vital component of the Great Lakes water system, carrying water from the Upper Lakes, Superior, Michigan, Huron, and Erie, towards the St. Lawrence River, which eventually empties into the Atlantic Ocean. Anyhow, before European settlers...
That other one said, yeah. Okay, so here's the power of it. They go through how, of course, it was mystical to the Native Americans. Even the mist of the water was the beginning of the reset. The people appreciated it. The end of the reset, the people said, let's clean it up, let's use it. Was it faked? Was it there left over? Was anything really built during the millennium?
Seasonal gatherings often took place along the riverbanks where oral histories were shared, goods were traded, and alliances were formed. And then there was the Mist of the Falls, considered by some to be spiritually cleansing, and thus was also incorporated into ceremonial practices.
All right, that's just a little bit of mysticism. So anyway, here's the guy that they're like, hey, I've seen some waterfalls, and then they come up with this in the 1700s.
Trading posts. By 1720, the French built Fort Niagara, a stronghold at the river's mouth on Lake Ontario, to protect their commercial and military interest in the region. But if we fast forward to 1763, following Britain's conquest of Canada, French influence waned, and the British took control of Fort Niagara. By the late
Look at this picture here, and look at how many ships are out there, and these towers in the background. It looks like that building.
Following Britain's conquest of Canada, French influence waned.
So they built this building.
Took control of Fort Niagara.
Sketch this from the time. It looks exactly like it, except there's tons more star for it.
Between the Great Lakes and the continent's interior, the Niagara area took on an entirely new role, beyond serving as just a
This is a nice picture.
Spiritual sanctuary and trading corridor, began to evolve into an economic asset.
So where this is going, why Niagara Falls looked way different in 1901. It was beautiful. it was something that worked. You know, they took it from this to this because they had to, because there wasn't something already there before, and then they built these ones on the bottom. Is this section where my mouse is that Photoshop to make it look fuzzy like a Google Earth video photo?
Built the first hydroelectric power plant in the region. This facility operated using direct current, a system developed by Thomas Edison. While functional, DC had a major limitation though, since electricity could
So there's Edison. So that's putting it what? 1870, 1880s, getting busy. Gonna be able to jump that electricity 100 miles. Trains powered from Niagara in New York City 5 years after the Civil War. Finished up and ready, you know, let's run these cables. Is it that hard to believe we were all in on paying the people rebuild this so we can act like this is normal, and they've presented us a history in their mind that works, but it's never as cluttered as this picture?
only be transmitted a few miles before losing significant power. The system was incredible all the same, relying on diversion tunnels that channeled water from the Niagara River towards mechanical turbines. These turbines generated power to light streets and supply small local industries. However, as the demand for electricity continued to rise, the direct current system proved insufficient.
Oh, so you have to go to AC. That's when goodbye Westinghouse, hello
For a
Edison.
rapidly expanding industrial landscape. The true breakthrough came in 1896 when Nikola Tesla and George Westinghouse implemented the first alternating current system at Niagara Falls. Alternating current allowed electricity to be transmitted over long distances without significant power loss, solving one of the biggest challenges.
Wow, look at a whole factory full of electricity
The first
makers.
major test of
From
the system took place on
1900,
November the 16th,
1890,
1896, when
Niagara.
electricity generated
What's
at
going
the
on?
falls was successfully transmitted 22 miles to Buffalo, New York. This milestone proved that hydroelectric power could not only
And I
supply
remember when I was a kid watching that football star O.J. Simpson be when he got 200 yards rushing in one game. Nobody thought that was possible.
an entire city, but also industries across the region. As a result, factories, foundries, and chemical plants began setting up operation near the falls, as these companies were drawn in by the promise of cheap and abundant.
Invest in something that would offer cheap and abundant electricity for something new. I wonder if you people that invested in Bitcoin are going to end up thinking like, wow, we got played.
Began to transform, but with growth came new challenges. A surging workforce, increased infrastructure demands, and this economy was entirely dependent on the river. This marked the next chapter in Niagara Falls' evolution.
Be
a period of
careful what you
expansion,
ask for.
economic boom that seemed unstoppable.
And it did. Boy, they rode that pony.
Union Carbide set up operations, as others took on the production of things like aluminum for automobiles and aviation. Additionally,
So gone is we could use some fresh water and electricity to move our happy workers around. Now it's profit. Now it's money. Now it's aluminum. Now it's, I don't know if there was the golden age and the reset, but I believe that gilded age for sure. This is my sketchy
it was now a key industrial hub in the north.
internet.
But like any city that grows too fast, its boom wouldn't last forever. By the mid-20th century, global
Again, look at
competition and technological
electricity
advancements began
generation.
to weaken the falls industrial sector.
Yet we
Companies
needed
that
nuclear
had once
power or,
thrived
oh
on the
no.
cheap hydroelectric power started relocating to regions with lower labor costs, new energy sources, and relaxed.
Isn't that lower labor cost? But then when the lower labor cost ran out for our citizens because of like fairness and protection and, you know, well, Mexico. Well, now Mexico is like too expensive. How about China? Now, China, well, they're not our friend. You owed us money.
city entered a period of decline. As
Uh-oh.
industry shut down, numerous buildings were abandoned and fell into despair. Former textile mills, chemical plants, and metalworking shops stood empty, doing little more than gathering rust.
They're just not running. They don't need them anymore. They worked so well, and I'm sure they still work. But then they poisoned everybody.
Groundwater, and were releasing toxic gases into the air. By 1978, New York Governor Hugh Carey ordered the evacuation of more than 800 families, declaring the area an environmental disaster zone. 2 years later, in 1980, President Jimmy Carter signed a federal emergency declaration, leading to the relocation of over 1,000 additional families. And considering the seriousness of the situation, the president went a step further, labeling Love Canal as the first site to be included in the Superfund, a federal program.
Unfortunately, the super funds that were declared then are what 90%, I'm guessing, of still the ones, but there's hundreds and hundreds more. We can't afford to clean up all the super funds. We can't afford to admit how many there are because our insurance is already being tested by the war, the hot war, that weather war. Have you ever seen those? The Brush Junkie and Shane, when they in those other channels that show how they're manipulating the weather and starting fires and things like that. I think that's true. I agree with them. They have to be real careful. Like, oh, it could be, but I'm a Christian guy that going like, I'm a prophet for God, even though I'm not charismatic and I've only had those two visions a long time ago. I still am a believer that believes all that. I think they're trying to kill us, man, and I think they want you dead. We're gonna watch a little bit more of that. Wrap it up for me, super fun boy.
Program dedicated to cleaning up hazardous waste sites. But Love Canal was just one example. As factories shut down and abandoned infrastructure fell into neglect, the region's industrial pollution became more visible. Decaying buildings became hazardous waste sites with chemical residues.
So now who wants to take anybody on your honeymoons at Niagara and Love Canal? Who even wants a honeymoon? Who wants to get married? Who wants a family?
Though the industrial boom of Niagara Falls is long gone, traces of its manufacturing past still remain. Some former factories and power plants have been repurposed into historical centers, while others stand abandoned as relics of a bygone era. The Rainbow Bridge and other transportation infrastructure continue to connect both sides of the
See it in the background there? That's that wall. Now we just have to keep. We are kind of bouncing around, but it's for a reason. We saw the button saw, the genius of the water supply. They figured out a problem. They needed it.
In 2005, for example, when upper watershed rainstorms led to increased turbidity, the DEP added the chemical compound alum to the tainted supply as emergency treatment to lower particle level. Beyond additives, the DEP further fortifies its water supply here, at the Catskill, Delaware ultraviolet water treatment plant. Capable of treating nearly 2.3 billion gallons a day, over twice the city's daily demand, this facility is the biggest of its kind in the world, with its 56 UV pipelines adding another layer of defense against waterborne illnesses. But not all of New York's water goes through this plant, nor does all of it emanate from the pristine, protected Catskills. The other 10% of New York's water is still pulled from the Croton watershed, and unlike its supply sibling, Croton water requires filtration. Buried here below a golf course, air is added to the Croton water to float particles and salts to the surface for skimming before the same chemicals and minerals are added.
Pretty soon, those people in that city are not going to be worth the effort it takes to feed them.
Off them are what allowed New York to bloom into a true megacity across the 20th century. Today, they are old, leaky, and breaking down. Tunnel number 1 was activated in 1917, number 2 went online in 1936, and today both are in need of inspection and likely repair. As for the lines connected to the tunnels, well, the DEP reported in 2020...
This whole island, it will, for the third time, be a tax write-off for the mafia. You made me an offer I couldn't refuse while I was still breathing.
that its mains only experienced 5 breaks
Hey,
per
that's
100
my
miles,
car.
a rate far below the national average of 25 per 100, it still reportedly costs
Was
around
that 420 on that awning?
100 miles, a rate far below the national average
Okay.
of 25 per 100.
You
It
insist.
still reportedly costs around $400 million a year to repair
Pick
all
up
the
your
city's
pole when
busted
you
pipes.
walk.
A process made infinitely more difficult by New York's notoriously dense underground infrastructure. Power
It's
cables to
notorious.
subway
You know what
lines.
they mean by
Additionally,
notoriously
because of
dense?
the age and varying quality of the pipeline supplying each
That
city,
when a long time ago when they were building this stuff up, they had time to plan it. So they did.
Like a law firm, investors bought shares in specific chambers rather than the VOC in general, so returns were based on the profits of that specific chamber. The good thing about this is it incentivized shareholders to make their chambers as efficient as possible. But the downside was your chamber's level of profit could ultimately be affected by elements outside your control. Maybe your chosen chamber simply didn't have the best geography to facilitate trade, or there was a local labor shortage. Maybe you had worse weather or a disease outbreak. Needless to say, not all chambers were built equal. Amsterdam was the real moneymaker. It was responsible for half of the initial capital raised. Zealand was the second most.
You just have to accept the fact that everybody said, okay, we'll buy. Well, they didn't start with heroin. So don't just say, yeah, sure, I'll try heroin. They were doing lace and dollies and Bibles.
Had risen in value since he first bought them.
Pepper.
So, though he missed out on the big bucks at the end of his investment, he was able to make a nice little profit on his sale. Active stock trading had just been invented. Of course, people sold their stocks when they had an immediate debt to pay. Like when someone on Facebook Marketplace sells a recently bought PS5 because the rent is due. However, Jan Allerts proved that trading stocks for profit wasn't a bad way to go. From then on, shares were swapped in St. Olaf's Chapel or on.
So this VOC, this East India, that one guy just said like, "Oh, I bought too much. I better just sell it." And they went like, "Oh, he did okay on selling a stock." Reset much? Stock market much? The one takeaway is these were the way the people were in the Bible. They lived in the same cities the people lived in the Bible. They probably dressed like this. All that talk of like, the people in the Bible were one step away from being a caveman. They were one step away from God in his mercy allowed their temple to be turned into a den of thieves, but they didn't have that stock market temptation.
On a bridge by the harbor, right next to market stalls selling meats and grain. Things picked up so much that a few years later, in August of 1611, Amsterdam opened the world's first stock exchange. This
Amsterdam, damn. You should not say that naughty word.
new building might not have been a stock exchange in the way we would imagine one in our time, but it opened the doors to a new way to make money from investing. And a new way to make money always changes how business is done. Chapter 5.
Amsterdam, damn.
Treasuries and treacheries. By the mid-17th century, the stock exchange had become a sophisticated fixture of every financial landscape. Other countries and cities took note of this revolutionary central.
Wow, we should copy them. And this is actually how we got here to our world today. What you would have me believe without the Bible, it's all these guys. And then we're going to be like, I like nutmeg, I like clove. Who likes
hugely
heroin?
valuable exotic spices, like cloves and nutmeg. But Drake didn't know how pricey these things were until he returned to England in 1580. Investors in Drake's original expedition saw ginormous returns on his haul. Drake had become a celebrated hero over
Now he's known as being like the first pirate.
East Indies, but they couldn't do that without more naval power. They got that in 1588, when Queen Elizabeth I's kingdom seized Spanish and Portuguese ships and cargo upon defeating.
Wow, it's just like in one exasperated breath, they puke out our history that makes us go, I guess. And then Darwin, yeah, and then evolution, then eugenics, and then white power ruled, and now it's like, okay, now we're backing off of that because we're not going to take no IQ tests.
Empire's structure, it was composed of different regions, entities, and self-governing groups, like the Galactic Senate in the Star Wars prequel trilogy. Suraj Udala was growing concerned with the EIC's increasing military capabilities, so he demanded the British to seize their unauthorized fortifying of Fort William trading post in Calcutta. The Trade Federation, the East India Company, only partially complied with the demand because they said they needed to defend themselves against the French. Turns out they should have been more concerned about Suraj Udala, because he captured the fort with his army in June of 1756. I suppose in the eyes of the EIC, he had just proven their point. In response, Robert Clive was dispatched to reclaim Calcutta.
Honestly, that is like looking in a mirror. That's spooky. Hey, there's me when I was a kid.
To 1559, he became the latest member of a merchant family. 3 of his brothers were successful entrepreneurs, but Isaac learned the tricks of the trade from his brother-in-law. By the time he was 25, he had been registered as a successful grocer. His wealth and success were
This is a guy, a relative of the guy that sold the first stock, and then your history worked out like this because they want you to believe this. They've added 1,000 years to your history to explain their ships to their World War II dreadnoughts from this. And we do know that the Apostle Paul was on a ship that could hold 380 souls. That's a lot, and go on month-long trips
the VOC
without having to worry. They never mentioned like, oh, what's that scurvy killing everybody?
so ahead of its time that the existence of the first publicly traded corporation predated an official stock exchange. Deals were made with the sellers and buyers, announcing prices and solidifying trades with hand slaps and high fives. Before long, commoners were investing in the VOC. As the company grew, Isaac Lemaire became a governor in the company, which gave him greater control and insights into the running of this money-making behemoth. Unfortunately, Isaac wanted more. Or at least, that's the reason the
How can they make it that personalized? One person, not Nebuchadnezzar, not Artaxerxes, the king of Persia, or King David. It's some little local guy. It affected somebody, and now they traced it down to affecting.
Entered the economic system. That's why this ancient system isn't money laundering as we define it today, even though it remains a tactic amongst black market businesses and terrorist financiers, although the biggest flaw is that it relies too heavily on trust between partners. It's no
So there are those people that are the bad guys, but trust within partners is the bad thing.
By 1778, internships were only 3 years long, though it wasn't until the start of the 1800s that an intern would get a bit of a salary. But once you were in, it was all free training, free drinks, free food, and even nap rooms, like an 18th century version.
Doesn't that sound like you're a version of being a made man? Where's that one? Is it that hard for us to believe that the mafias run every little thing?
The mafia controls much of the agriculture business economy in southern Italy, overseeing a system that ensures a steady stream of cheap supermarket staples to keep up with the huge global demand. So how exactly is the Italian mafia making millions of tin tomatoes? In 2022, Italy was responsible for producing more tomatoes than any other European country, and was the 3rd largest producer of processed tomatoes in the world, amounting to...
Well, just think of that. Italy's pretty close to the United States. They're pretty small. That's China. But it's a small market. But they're not going to leave dollars on the table. The mafia is going to run everything, and it does run everything. It's time to... Joe Biden didn't plan to cheat and win the election. He's incapacitated couch potato. They planned it for him as much as they planned it for Trump. Trump's not some evil genius. Mercedes rubbing his hands together going, I wish I was Midas.
4.9 billion euros of its economy. But in southern Italy, Mafia organizations have seized control of huge swathes of farmland, either by buying it or intimidating farm owners into letting them manage the land. The mafia runs many aspects of the agriculture business, from production right through to transport and distribution.
In every country, in every business, whether it's red peppers, tomatoes, potatoes, sugar beets, hemp, or acidic fluoridic acid that you can filter out and sell as fluoride to drug makers and rat poisoners.
The Agro-Mafia Observatory, an organization that analyzes criminal involvement in the food chain, estimates that the Italian mafia's food-related business was worth 24.5 billion euros in 2019, accounting for an estimated 10% of the mafia's total turnover. A business
That makes them filthy rich. They got a lot of money.
of their wages. The laborers are mostly migrants, many of whom have made the perilous journey across the Mediterranean, from North Africa to Western Europe, in search of safety and work. They are recruited with the promise of work contracts, which is a
Because you got to have money, and your food shouldn't cost this much. You should be able to practically live for free, but we can't own the land. We can't go on so many lands because it's the mafia. It's the legislative decree 9/11 in reverse.
were working under the caporalato system. And from 2013 to 2019, more than 1,500 people have died as a result of these working conditions.
Le nuove norme contro lavoro nero e sfruttamento in agricoltura prevedono...
So the whole world knows what's coming. What's this one? Melvin Capital, an American investment firm named after his grandfather, announced the fund would close and return any remaining money. Mr. Plotkin must have done something wrong with the group. And he was one of these guys that in the GameStop short squeeze of 2021, it went from a $14 billion business to a $6.8 billion business in a matter of days. At one point, losing $1 billion a day, if I read this correctly, that's how quickly the new system can take out somebody. And that's how quickly they could take down a city or a system if they ever have to do it. The fund was noted for having high returns, 30% annually. This guy was trying to do it on his own. And supposedly some people on that 4chan or Reddit or one of those things cooked up a deal to say, hey, we can do a short squeeze, man. Approximately 140% of GameStop's public float had been sold short, and the rush to buy shares to cover those positions as the price rose caused it to rise even further. What I'm trying to warn you is that Paco thinks this is all a big setup, and everybody has their own local newspapers. I have mine, you have yours. Is it going to tell you, watch out for lying governments? It's only going to be if only the Democrats lie or only the Republicans lie. But everything else is just going to be, our small town, like 150 other towns around Chicago got out and said, oh, we need to save the jobs. It's all bad. It's just an everyday world to them. And where we are now is we're the people that are left over living in poison. And there are very precious few places to live. Otherwise, this is your future.
Border, but their primary use today is tourism rather than industry. Meanwhile, the canals that once diverted water to the power turbines still exist, though their function is now limited. One of the most iconic sites is the Niagara Parks Power Station on the Canadian side. This historic plant has been restored and converted into an
Come
exhibition
visit the
space,
old
showcasing the
starport.
crucial role that power
Look at
played
the
in
way
shaping
things
the
used to
region's
be in the
development.
golden
In an effort
age
to preserve
past.
this industrial heritage, various conservation projects have been launched. On the Canadian side, the Niagara Parks Commission has worked to restore.
This is a reset. This worldwide phenomenon is not going to just go away. And we're not going to say, well, doesn't look like it was the added 1,000-year thing. America's great again, business as usual. It's only going to continue like this, not the stab in the heart, the wear down, the art of crying wolf, of living in a constant fear of paycheck to paycheck. Your government could go broke. The world could be mutually assured destructed with atomic bombs if our governments don't get along. Your 13-year-old daughter wants a tattoo. I know the world's busy. And that's why I think you should come back, because a lot of times we'll end up going over the Bible and proving how it's true and how not one of his sheep will be left behind. And that's the whole key to everything, that the doctrine of election will stand, that at one point, some of us have been born again spiritually to see that Jesus is the answer. He is the way, the truth, and the life. And they will hate us for it. But once we're born again and we know who we are and this is not our home, we're going to realize that it's a substance of something called faith that gives us that hope. And we're going to hold on to that faith. Me and my friends are never going to tell you anything else. Why would we? We're trying to prove that we're called, chosen, and faithful to having your best interest at heart. Amen. Hallelujah. Aho. Aloha. Arrivederci. Ciao. Sayonara. Auf Wiedersehen. Nakame. Adios.